Hello, you're listening to the DC Capstone Report. Today we're going to take a look at this past week's SEC Media Days. We're going to look at how Alabama fared at the Media Days. We're going to, in the second segment, we'll spotlight 3 players that went and spoke on behalf of the university. And then finally, we'll look at Nick Saban and his challenges for this year's team.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions.
Well, Gary, it was a good week last week for Alabama at the SEC Media Days. You know, when that happens, all of our listeners out there know we can perk their ears up and get ready because the season is just around the corner. A lot of excitement here in T-Town at the Capstone. The players have been working out all summer and working hard, and then when they see the SEC Media Days, they know that the fall practices are just around the corner and getting things to get ready. Students will be coming back on campus. So it's always great for our listeners out there and our fans to kind of listen and find out what's going on at Media Days and get an idea of just what the dynamics are going to be of our team coming up. This past week, it was on Wednesday when Alabama went, and they took 3 players with them, Damian Harris, Ross Pierce-Baker, and Anthony Jennings. They were representatives. All those are on the Leadership Council and all well versed in what Alabama does and to be leaders on the team this year. So, and then Nick Saban, of course, he was every place that he went, he was just in throng of people around him. Now, this was a little different this year. One of the differences is that it had moved. In past years, our listeners will remember that out there that the Media Days took place in Birmingham at the Winfrey Hotel, but this year, it moved to the College Football Hall of Fame there in Atlanta, Georgia. So it was a bigger venue. It really drew a lot more media attention from around the nation. A lot more people showed up there for it, and it seemed to be a big success. Now next year, it'll be back at the Winfrey in Birmingham, and then after that, no announcement was made on where it might be going. But Media Days is always a big thing. It signals the start of football seasons, and that's what we live for out there is to Alabama football, and can't wait for the season to start after we won the championship. So Alabama's been working hard according to Coach Saban in the off season, and it's well shown in his thoughts. We ended last year with him standing there in front of the Bryant-Denny Stadium on the steps talking about the championship, and he said, and I think he said, and kind of got the team to go along with him on his last words. There is the last time we saw him speak in front of everyone, he said, "We are not finished yet." And that "yet" theme seemed to transition into even his speaking at the SEC Media Days. He was well prepared. In his beginning, he kind of cut off all the questions that were going to be asked about. The one thing that's been the elephant in the room, you might say, the one thing everybody's thinking about, afraid to ask him about, and that is the quarterback competition between Tua and Jalen Hurts. He pretty much, in the very beginning, in his remarks, said that any questions related to that, he was going to have to answer is yet to be determined. So that theme of yet kind of bled over into his remarks to begin the Media Days. It's yet to be determined. By that, what he means is, no one has won the team yet. And if it's our listeners remember last year, the years past when we had quarterback competitions, those were not resolved until maybe the first, second, third game of the season. So he's looking for somebody to win the team. He sees the upside in Tua, upside in Jalen. Both of them have their upside. Both of them have their downside. And he's looking for somebody to come in and make a difference in the fall practices. And I wouldn't be surprised, based on his comments, that we see that competition still go over into the first game of the year. And then we see both quarterbacks play in that first game. One of them is going to have to do something extraordinary or something very bad, either to win or lose the competition in fall scrimmages or in the fall camp. I really believe that they're going to bleed over into the season, and he kind of said that in his opening remarks. He still took some questions on it, and he was true to his word. He said, "Hey, that's yet to be determined. That's yet to be determined." As he made the rounds, he kept that same theme going on through all the radio shows and TV shows, and even on ESPN later when he was asked by Paul Feinbaum that it's yet to be determined. So I think that was a big question that was on everybody's mind that really didn't get answered at the Media Days. His answers, one of the reporters pressed him a little bit, and he kind of got his dander up just a little bit. pressed him and said, "Do you expect Jalen Hurts to be on the team when the team plays his first game?" And of course, he said, "I expect him to be on the team." And then he said, "I don't know that he will be on the team, but I expect him." But I think what he was trying to say was, you never know when you start the season if everybody's going to be on the team or not. And he couldn't give him back a 100% answer, but he expects both quarterbacks to compete through the fall camp and then go on forward into next year, next season, competing for that starting job. He did talk a little bit about other things in his opening statements and began to address some of the needs and some of the things that he'll be looking at during the season. He's looking at his defense being needs to do some replacement. He talked about the thinness in the linebacker core. He talked about having to, replace not only Van Cowan that has been dismissed from the team, that he kind of solidified that Keith Holcomb was, as it is right now, is not coming back to play. So that leaves a little thinness in the linebackers, and he admitted that he had even moved one of his linebackers to get some playing time out there in the middle from the defensive end position, from the outside linebacker position, and Christian Miller. But because of the injury to Terrell Lewis, that's going to cause them to rethink a little bit of that. And Christian Miller will now be stepping up and getting first team reps along with Anthony Jennings and the outside linebacker. That's something that you and I have already talked about, Gary, on this podcast before. One of the things coming up, he did talk about that as well. Talked about the youngness of the defensive backs, and we've spoken about that on this podcast as well. Then Coach Saban went on to talk about the strengths of the offense in the running backs and the young wide receivers that are playmakers. He talked about the offensive line, of which he expects to be a really good standard offensive line for Alabama, one that can really make a difference. A lot of experience, a lot of good interchangeable parts that move around. So he was very brief in his comments. He answered questions succinctly. A couple of times they tried to bait him into getting in this UCF debate about their national champions or not. He didn't fall for that. He looks like he's moved on from that and just said, hey, they had a good year, but he believes in the playoff system, that the playoff system got it right. The right people were in the playoff, and Alabama win the playoff as the national champions. He didn't go for that debate anymore. But there were some fun moments in it as well. He got a big laugh out of his the off-season running out of gas thing with his boat, where he explained that he takes a lot of his leadership team out to the lake there and has times for them, and then some later on he'll take other team members out and they'll run around the boat, and he had a brand new boat, and his boat ran out of gas, everybody thought, but it was actually what didn't run out of gas. It had a bad fuel pump in it. But he said that the people out there all over the nation had sent him over 100 gas cans. So if anybody needed a gas can, he had plenty to give away. But everybody laughed at that. And it's good to see him. I saw him really relaxed in his questions. I think he's confident in his team this year. And I think he's excited about of the challenges that he has ahead of him for this team. And some of the things we'll talk about in our final segment today, I think he was excited about that. And we can see the passion, the excitement he has coming back. He's not complacent. I think that's the line that he's told everybody, that we're not going to remain complacent. We're going to get better. We're going to do some things right. And I think the way the season ending on that last second play, could have gone the other way, could have lost the championship, kind of sends him into this year realizing they have room to improve. And he thinks he's got a team this year that's going to make that improvement. And I really believe that he believes that we have a team coming back that could be actually better than last year's national championship team.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions. Golden Shores Productions, providing you the best recording facility in North Central Alabama.
Well, Gary, in part two of the segment, I want to concentrate on those three players that went to media days. In the first segment, we talked about Coach Saban and what he said, but I want to talk a little bit about these three players. Damian Harris, Ross Pierschbaker, and Anthony Jennings were the three players that Alabama chose to take to the media days. Now, a lot of thought goes into who you're going to take. You take leaders, you take people who can communicate well, who can get the point across, and also who can communicate the theme that you have for your team. Well, Gary, you and I spoke on a previous podcast about Jeff Puritan and his job with media relations and how a great job his staff has done with the players and bringing them along. And it goes without saying, but he had a great impact, I'm sure, in these three young men that came and spoke. These are three young men that were paraded around, put under pressure under the media, the lights, the cameras, the radio, microphone. That goes out there on the airwaves, and you wonder sometimes if you say anything that's going to be bulletin board material for another team, or you're going to say anything that's going to be a hot button issue that's going to bring up controversy. But these three young men spoke so well and so eloquently and gave us some great insight into the Alabama team that will be coming back. When Anthony Jennings began to speak, you could tell that he was very passionate about his team. You can tell that he was really, really dialed in already this early in the team that we had coming back. They tried to bait him into talking about the UCF because he had put some things out on social media, about when UCF started claiming the national championship a day after the national championship game, and they tried to bait him into saying something about it. You could tell he had been well coached through it and gotten past it, and he made that same statement the next 7 and said, "Hey, we've moved past that." That was an emotion speaking on the day after the national championship. Wasn't sure why they would be claiming something that we had won on the field, and they said we moved past that. They had a great season, and he just was really mature in the way he handled those questions. And how reporters can do. They can pick at young people, young players, and get some things out of them. But the more they asked questions of him, the more you could see that he was really in the zone about what the team was. He wanted to talk about the team, about the defense, and when they asked him about Terrell Lewis's injury and those things that Terrell Lewis had brought to the team, he was very complimentary, of course, of Terrell Lewis and speaking of his injury and how unfortunate it was. But also he was really, really perceptive as to what the team could do to step up. Spoke about Christian Miller. He spoke about other players that you and I discussed just last week on the podcast. He spoke about the freshmen that were coming in and spoke about the players that they already had there, like Jamie Mosley and others that could step up and fill those roles. So he was ready to speak, did a really great job. Ross Piercebaker, when he took the stage and made the rounds, he was very well spoken. He told about the offense, spoke highly of the offensive line coming back, talked about his move over to play center and how being interchangeable on the offensive line made you even more prepared for the game, not only in college, but got you prepared for the NFL, where they have only a few linemen on the field and at a time, and how sought after you are, where you can have more jobs like playing tackle and center and also being able to play guard. So he talked about that. He talked about the great running backs that they had and how it was a pleasure for the offensive line to Alabama to block for them and to open holes, and how when he saw people like Damian Harris and Najee Harris breaking off big runs, how the offensive line felt so good about that and what they were able to accomplish. They questioned him about the quarterbacks as being a center. Who would you want a center? He maintained the company line on that both quarterbacks are great. He didn't fall for any kind of debate on who's going to be the best quarterback. Talked about both being good leaders, that he would be glad to have either one of them a quarterback in the team. So he did a great job in getting out some things and thoughts about the offense. And then you have Damian Harris. And, Gary, I just want to say Damian Harris, I've always loved him as a player, loved his game, loved what he brings as a leadership. But to hear him speak, Gary, our listeners out there, if you get a chance to go on YouTube and listen to his talk when he gave his questions and answers, his well thought out answers, his very ability to communicate. That young man has got a career later on in sports announcing and ESPN. He could probably do anything he wants to after he's finished with his NFL career. But he spoke real highly of the offense and what we have coming back. They tried to bait him into asking questions about UCF because he was vocal right after the UCF posted their social media post about being national champions. And he didn't fall for it. He just said, "Hey, I moved on from that. That was emotional decision right the very last day after the championship. But I moved on for that. Hey, they did a good season, but we are the national champions." And he didn't fall for any debate about that. They also, in him, they really tried to pick him about the leadership, about Tua or Jalen and who he'd rather have, and he didn't fall for that either. He made some great, interesting comments. I think our listeners will be, fortunate to hear, and I think everybody out there that's trying to pick sides in this quarterback race. He said that watching Jalen and Tua in this quarterback competition has brought them closer together as individuals on a team, and it brought the team closer together because the way they've handled themselves in this quarterback competition. Both want to start, both want to be the man to play and lead the Crimson Tide, but both have gone about it in a great way that shows great leadership, great character. And he said there's an upside to both of them, and they would be, Alabama would be great with either one of them quarterback, and he didn't see any problem with either one of them playing. So he didn't fall for any making a decision over it. Matter of fact, he got into a banter back and forth with a reporter who kept pressing him on it, and he was able to stand his ground and really make a difference. Another thing, sometimes you pick at somebody's pride, trying to get them to say something they really wouldn't normally say. Previously that week, Kentucky's running back Benny Snell, had said that he's the best running back in the SEC, and he has some stats to back that claim up. And he's from Kentucky. Well, Damian Harris is from Kentucky, and he chose to leave the state and come to the University of Alabama. So they tried to pick him about Benny Snell saying that he was the best player. And I thought he handled that question so eloquently when he said, Benny Snell is a great player. And he said, and let me say this, wouldn't anybody at their position think they're the best? If they don't think they're the best, why are they playing the game? And that was the perfect answer to forestall any kind of controversy or any bulletin board material out there. So those three players, Damian Harris, Anthony Jennings, and Ross Piercebaker, they represented the university well at SEC Media Days. And I think not only represent us well there, represent us well on the team, and are great leaders. And I look for big things from those three this year. And I believe they're going to be able to lead our team back to another national championship.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by Golden Shores Productions. Golden Shores Productions, providing you the best recording facility in north central Alabama.
All right, in this last segment, Gary, I've already talked a lot about Nick Saban and talked about the media days. Just want to touch on briefly some challenges ahead for Nick Saban this year. Of course, the number one challenge is he's got to pick a starting quarterback. I think we know a little bit about what he's going to do at that. That's going to play out maybe in the fall practice all the way up to the first game. So look for both players to play and one to win the team to be the one that starts. Maybe some other options for the other player as well during the season. The next thing is a defensive backfield. He's got to find players that are going to come in there. That's a big challenge to play. That doesn't have much season on them. That doesn't have much experience on them. But I think that's one thing he's excited about is that challenge, accepting that challenge and getting in there and helping find a defensive backfield. I think he's got a thin defensive line, defensive backs. He's thin on the linebackers in the middle and now on the edge rushers. So he's got that to fill and find some young people to come up. And then on the offensive side of the ball, after you've tied the quarterback, I think you got to get that offensive line to gel into a cohesive unit. So there's a lot of challenges facing Nick Saban this year. And the one challenge I think you'll have to overcome is that complacency. Winning the national championship and overcoming complacency. I think he said that well when he said we're not finished yet. He's got this team longing for another perfect season, longing for another championship. So look for him to rise to the challenge as the best coach in college football right now. And I look for Alabama to fill all these needs and come back this year with a great team that competes for another national championship. You've been listening to the DC Capstone Report. DC Capstone Report is brought to you each week at this time by Golden Shores Productions. You can also hear the DC Capstone Report on the Morning Blitz with Martin Houston on Tide 102.9.9.